be with you this afternoon. I want to thank Tilly for this very kind introduction. I don't think you have to worry about that. Do I have to worry about that?
There are a few people who are here.
Yes, right. Okay, and if they will raise their hands, I will continue to work on this. I should point out that it is a privilege to be invited for this special day here at Community Church, because you always honor W.B. Du Bois each year. I want to just say to the younger people here, you do know that W.B. Du Bois died the night before the March on Washington. He died in August of 1963 in Ghana. And so when Tilly said she came to hear him after she got married, now you know when she got married. In July 1900, at one of the first international Pan-African conferences held in the world, in England, in Westminster Hall in London, among the resolutions adopted was a general appeal to the world, a general appeal to the nations of the world. And in its first paragraph is this sentence: "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. The question as to how far differences of race, which show themselves chiefly in the color of the skin and the texture of hair, are going to be made hereafter the basis of denying to over half the world the right of sharing to their utmost ability the opportunities and privileges of modern civilization." One of the four signatories to this appeal was W.E. Burgott Du Bois. This was 2.5 years before the publication of The Souls of Black Folk, that group of essays that, of course, made this sentence so famous and so connected to W.B. Du Bois in this country and throughout the world. Where the line appears in the forethought of that group of essays at the very beginning of that book, wherein lie buried many things which, if read with patience, may show the strange meaning of being black here in the dawning of the 20th century. This meaning is not without interest to you, gentle reader. He wrote this in 1903. This meaning is not without interest to you, gentle reader, for the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. I pray you then receive my little book in all charity, studying my words with me, forgiving mistake and foible, for sake of the faith and passion that is in me, and seeking the grain of truth hidden there. I don't know if Du Bois had read how much of Frederick Douglass. He certainly knew of Frederick Douglass and wrote about him in that very book. But 40 years before he wrote those words, Frederick Douglass said this at a church in New York in June 1863. "I think that most of you will agree with me in respect to the surpassing importance of the subject we are here to consider this evening, though you may differ with me in other respects. It seems to me that the relation subsisting between the white and colored people in this country is, of all other questions, the great, paramount, imperative, and all-commanding question of this age and nation to solve. The problem of the 19th century was the problem of the 20th century. What is the problem of the 21st century? And I suggest that because we all know it is still the problem of the 21st century, that the problem of the 21st century is essentially the problem of memory, of knowing what happened and believing it. When we lose our memory, we lose the ability to know both where and when we are. Our orientation is made possible, defined by memory. When we have no memory, we become disoriented. When I try to explain the importance of history to young people, and those of you who have known me for a while know that I had a job before. I had a job at the State House, and that job was at the Museum of Afro-American History. When I try to explain the importance of history to young people, I ask them to engage in an exercise, a role play of losing their memory. Young people are a lot better than this, than old people, but so I won't try it on you. I'm just going to describe it to you. I ask them to engage in an exercise, a role play of losing their memory. I ask them to close their eyes. I clap my hands and I say, you have lost all your memory. You cannot remember anything. And then I begin to ask them questions. And they quickly understand that they are not able to answer questions like, what day is this? Where are you? What room and building are you in? Because those obvious questions cannot be answered without memory. I then tell them that I did not close my eyes. I did not lose my memory. And almost always, they immediately begin to ask me questions, playing this role play. And I answer those questions with inaccuracies, with lies. They realize that theirs is not only a disorientation of time and place, it is also a disorientation of recognizing truth from falsehood. It is the dangerousness of amnesia. Now, theologians have a fancy word for the opposite of amnesia. It is a word for recalling, recollecting, remembering the most fundamental things that we should remember. Do I have any theologians in the house? What is that word? The opposite of amnesia. It is anamnesis. Anamnesis. Right? When Jews think annually about the story of the Exodus, it is part of their religious and cultural anamnesis. When Christians who are sacramental gather every Sunday and hear the words, remember me, they are hearing the words of their anamnesis. History is our corporate memory. It is the memory of our individual existence incorporated into the memories of others' existence. If it is not known, forgotten, lost, stolen, or strayed, we suffer from corporate amnesia. Today, when we consider the problem of these times, this 21st century, we have an opportunity to cure our amnesia and consider the opportunities of a corporate, societal anamnesis. We must remember. Now, this recalling will never be easy because we have been and are the descendants of the horrible. There would be no need for us to gather to talk about change unless there was a history of deceit. And so we can look to a solution to this problem by looking to a solution to the problem of corporate societal amnesia. I would like to just speak about one piece of that amnesia that is common to all of us who call ourselves Americans. And that, of course, is the amnesia of our so-called founding, of how we became who we are politically and societally in these North and South American continents. And that, of course, is a history that is the history of imperialism, of slavery, and deceit and theft. Now, I'm going to just spend, because you haven't invited me to come for the next 10 Sundays, I will dwell mostly on part of that, and the part I will dwell on is the part of slavery in the foundation of the Americas. First, let me be clear about the period that I'm talking about. If you use in these United States 1619 as the appropriate date of the introduction of slavery in the North American British colonies, which would become the United States, slavery lasted for 246 years. If the end date is the passage of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. It will not be until 2111 that people of African descent will have been free as long as they have been enslaved in the United States. 2111. Even in Haiti, the Dominican Republic, what the Spaniards called Hispaniola, the first successful revolt against slavery occurred. Where the first revolt against slavery occurred, slavery lasted about 285 years. 285 years. It will be 2085 before Haitians and Dominicans of African descent will have been free as long as they've been enslaved. I gave this talk a few months ago before a better historian than I am, and they pointed out that I was being parochial when I used Virginia as when the first slaves came to the United States, of course, because I was ignoring every Spanish colony that it eventually became a state, and that I should definitely include Florida, where slavery began around 1580. Now, to move from the myth of slavery as an incidental occurrence in the early days of the European occupation of the Americas to the truth of slavery as part of the truth of the origins of the nations of the Americas, and specifically of the origins and economic success of the United States, will require a new anamnesis, a production of an accurate history, a new memory of our founding. The stories which we combine into the set of experiences, beliefs, and values that affect the way that we as Americans perceive who we are is sometimes called a paradigm. The values, a system of thought in a society that are most standard and widely held at a given time. Dominant paradigms are shaped by both the community's cultural background and by the context of a historical moment. It is what, when we say and we ask children, they can reply. That's how it happened. Right? That's a paradigm. And they can be accurate or they can be false. More accurate history will lead us to a new paradigm. The work for the 21st century is this new paradigm, what people call a paradigm shift. We must engage in a paradigm shift. Now consider this paradigm. The first record we have of a group of African people arriving in Massachusetts is from John Winthrop's journal. In his July 1637 notation, Puritans have been here for 7 years. John Winthrop wrote, "We had now slain and taken in all about 700. We sent 15 of the boys and 2 women to Bermuda, but by Mr. Pierce, but he missing it carried them to Providence Isle." I will translate. 7 years the Puritans have been here, and they engage in their first full-time war with a group of Native Americans, the Pequods. And that is the 700 that Winthrop is talking about, that they had slain and captured. And with the ones that they had captured, the Pequod prisoners of war, they decide to sell them all into slavery. It is not going to take a lot of imagination to understand how difficult it must be to sell a person into slavery who has been living here for 10,000 years, that they pretty much know where all the trees are. And so since they ran away so frequently, the Puritans did 2 things. They branded them, but they also found other places to sell them away from here, across water from here. And that's why Winthrop had suggested that they be taken to Bermuda. For whatever reason, the captain of the ship decides to take them to an island founded by Puritans off the coast of Central America, which they call Providence Isle. And then we receive this notation in February of 1638 in Winthrop's journal. Mr. Pierce in the Salem ship the Desire returned from the West Indies after 7 months. He had been at Providence and brought some cotton and tobacco and negroes, etc., from thence, and salt from Tortugas. He brings with him, back from that excursion, where he has traded for goods there with these Indians that he has taken. He brings back cotton, tobacco, and negroes. We know from this description the name of the captain, Mr. Pierce. We know the name of the ship, the Desire. We know that this ship was built in Marblehead and sailed out of Salem. We know where Providence Isle is, and we know none, not one, of the names of the Native Americans who were taken there, or the Africans who were brought back from there. Consider this is a paradigm of our founding. Understand this as the way to describe our founding history. Imagine asking a young person in elementary school, how was the United States founded? And not hearing the word Washington or Jefferson at all. Because this is the story of the founding. And the story of the founding goes like this. This is a society that was founded by Europeans, by Native Americans, and by Africans. And all three of those peoples, in their various ways, founded this place. Europeans, for a variety of reasons and a complicated history, engage in imperialism that takes them further and further away from Europe, and eventually they fall over the Americas. But once they are here, they have choices to make, and they make the choices that come out of that understanding of imperialism, and that understanding of imperialism is if there are no Europeans where they get to, it all belongs to them. It all belongs to them. If you had asked them in those early years why that was true, they would not have said because they're white. They would have probably said because they're Christian. And when they had to decide how that land would be split up, they did not send ambassadors to the places where they were coming and say, hey, we're thinking about coming to Massachusetts. We would like to sit down and have some meetings with you to see if there's any land you're not using. Listen to us. Listen to us. We cannot conceive of that. The idea of such a rational thing happening makes us laugh. Absolutely right. Makes us laugh. And, of course, when they had to make a decision about who should tell us where we can go and what we can have and what our relationship will be with other Europeans, who was the authority that they went to? The Pope. And it's the Pope who divided the Americas into land that the Portuguese would have and land that Spaniards would have. No one cared about the English. And then, of course, once that occurs, they have to believe that it is right. And so eventually they invent a language for what they have done. And their language includes words like discover. Now, I know no one here drives, but I see one person that might have driven. And I walk outside and I see your car. And guess what? You rushed in here and the door is still open. And I get behind the seat and I fiddle around, it gets going, and I drive down Boylston Street. I've just discovered your car. And the amazing thing about this place was that they, the Europeans, all the way through to the English and the French and the Dutch, never could imagine its wealth and size and vastness. Think about where they came from. And they come here and can't get it.